So a couple of years ago, Mariah and I went to Savannah, Georgia to celebrate our anniversary. I think it was our 20th that year. We had a lot of fun there. A lot of us have been there, right? It's close by. It's a great day trip. Lots of places to eat. Restaurants, bars, museums, shops, restaurants, bars. When you're on vacation, you sometimes wish there were more than 3 meals in a day. You kind of wish you were a hobbit. You know, hobbits have first breakfast and second breakfast and lunch, an afternoon snack, and supper and dinner. And you know Mariah's a chef. She's a good cook. She's picky. Unlike me, I could have a burger and fries most of the time for pretty much every meal and just be fine. She doesn't like to go out and eat somewhere unless it's something that she wouldn't or couldn't make at home. Yeah, a lot of us feel that way. It's expensive, and if you can do it better at home for a fraction of the price, what's the point? What's the point of spending all that money and then just being let down when you go to a restaurant thinking, I could have done that better at home? Well, there was a restaurant in town that was well known, and we got a lot of recommendations to go out to see it. And it was a very expensive place, mind you, not casual dining. They were particularly known for their steaks, and I love a good steak. So we went there, and as soon as I put my eyes back in my head after looking at the prices on the menu, I calmed down a little bit. We made our order. It was our anniversary, after all, 20 years of putting up with this. So, you know, she should be able to get whatever she wants, something fancy. So I ordered my steak, and my taste buds watered. Finally, it came out, and the waitress sat it down in front of me, and I cut into it, and it screamed in pain because it was not dead yet. It was still mooing. It was still prancing around in the field. It was just... It's like somebody back there just kind of took it and held it over a candle for a minute till it got a little brown on the outside and then put it out there. Nothing like the way I ordered it. Is this what we had come for? What a letdown, because I spent a lot of money on that. They say, oh, we'll put it back on the grill. You know, then it comes back overcooked when they do that. So no, just fight through as much. The thin part was okay, but you know, I was really disappointed. I was not wowed like I thought I was going to be wowed. And that's the way Naaman felt in this passage. Naaman, Naaman. I actually looked it up in Hebrew. I think it's supposed to be pronounced Naaman is what you would say. We usually say Naaman. Don't worry, there are lots of ways to mispronounce that name, and they're all perfectly fine. He was a commander in the army of Aram, which that's Syria today. In a lot of translations, it'll say Syria. That would have been easier to pronounce, Karen. He's described as a great warrior, but he has some kind of skin condition. You know, the text says leprosy, but those words get used to describe a lot of different skin conditions in the Bible. He suffers from this disease and finds out from a Hebrew slave that's serving his wife that they had captured, that there was a great prophet in the land of Israel, and he could cure Naaman's disease. So they leave out a little bit. You notice there's a few lines left out. I don't know why they left it out in the lectionary, but they did. And Naaman actually goes to the king of Aram and asks his permission to go. And the king says, yeah, sure, I'll even write you a little letter of recommendation to the king of Israel. And he writes him a letter to take with him and sends him with a bunch of cold, hard cash, a bunch of gold and a bunch of silver. The king allows him to travel to Samaria, and you know, that's one heck of a letter written from one king to another. Very important people asking for very important requests to help this great warrior. But when the king of Israel gets this letter, and he has this great warrior standing in front of him, he's probably looking like this at the warrior, from a country that has been an enemy of his country. He says, I know what this is. This is a trap. They're trying to get me to say no and then ensnare me in some kind of conflict. He doesn't trust the simple intentions that this man has. He just wants to be healed. But the king doesn't notice that. He just sees a Trojan horse. But the prophet Elijah hears about this and he says, come on down. Come on down to my place. Come to see God's power to heal. Then when he gets there, Elisha doesn't even bother to go out there and meet Naaman himself. He sends his attendant out there and says, just go tell him. Go tell him to bathe in the Jordan River 7 times, and you'll be healed. Apparently, Naaman expected some complicated ritual. He expected the prophet to come out, hold his hands to the skies, and bring down beams of light from heaven to cure him. He had traveled all this way and brought all this money to this prophet, and he expected something fancy, put on a show. But instead, the prophet just sends his attendant out there and says, go take a bath. Just go take a bath in the river. I could have done that at home. He says, we got rivers back home. I could have done that back there. Why did I come all this way from Syria for this wise man of God, this powerful healer who didn't even bother to come out and see me himself? So he does what all great men do. He throws a hissy fit. And he leaves. You can imagine this big, powerful warrior just stomping off, writing this whole trip off as a bust. He thinks he's been duped. I mean, after all, where did he hear this from? A slave girl? Someone that I had captured, took away from her home, and enslaved her to be my wife's servant. Why would she help him? But his servants step in and say, hey, you've come all this way. If he had asked you to do some kind of special sacrifice or say long prayers or go slay a dragon or something or stand on your head, you would have done it to cure yourself. He's just telling you something simple. Go bathe 7 times in the Jordan. Why not give it a try? I think this is the most relatable part of the story. How many of you had to say, Grandpa, take your medicine? If you take your blood pressure pill, you won't have these headaches and you won't get dizzy and your chest won't hurt. Or telling your friend, if you exercise regularly, you won't be short of breath when you walk up the stairs. Or, like my wife reminds me, you're diabetic. There's a simple solution though. Stop eating Oreos and stop drinking Coke. You'll be fine. You can kind of imagine these servants just rolling their eyes at this big, strong man for being such a baby. So Naaman did as he was told, that he dunked himself in the Jordan River 7 times, and he was miraculously healed. Great story about the power of God, and in their eyes it would have been seen as Israel's God being more powerful than the God of Syria. And in fact, after these passages, when Elisha refuses to take the money, he loads up some dirt from Israel into his carts, Naaman does, and takes it home to Syria because he says, I'm going to worship your God. And they would believe that you have to have the ground, you have to be on the ground of Israel to worship the ground of Israel. So he takes all this dirt from Israel home so that he can worship God at home. It demonstrates the power and authority that have been given to Elisha. Makes you wonder why the kings won't listen to the prophets when they're going around performing miracles like that. Like, hey, that guy just raised someone from the dead. You think maybe you should listen to him? Elijah, the predecessor to Elisha, he just called down fire from the heavens and killed 200 of your soldiers. Maybe you should do what he says. You see the same thing with Jesus later. Despite his power and authority, people just don't listen. The people who have power themselves just won't listen. So I want to draw your attention to something else in the story, something that's easy to miss. It's a story of healing that happened between people that would have fought on the battlefield, As always, though, Jesus tells us to look down. Who told Naaman about the about the healer Elisha? A slave. The girl was captured during battle. Her family probably killed, and she was dragged off and enslaved. Can you imagine being in that situation? We live in such a sterile world compared to the things that happened in the ancient world. Who talked Naaman into accepting the healing from Elisha? His servants. I know it says servants in the text, but the Hebrew word there is abad, and it means servant or slave. And I think we'd be kind of naive if we thought they were just, that when we say servants, we think they're like well-paid butlers. No, they were slaves. It's what they were. And the text is, the translation is trying to be polite. None of this would have happened without these slaves. You wouldn't have had any healing. The powerful couldn't get their crap together, arguing about who's trapping who and whether this is a threat, acting like babies, throwing tantrums, ripping their own clothes, then trying to pay Elisha in the riches that he brought, which Elisha refuses. Still not understanding that healing is a gift from God and that grace is not so cheap as silver and gold. Meanwhile, the slaves, the invisible ones, the ones that aren't named in the story, the nameless, are rolling their eyes. Only the slaves know where true healing comes from. Only those at the bottom of society's pecking order can see real power and authority when they see it. Grace, you can't buy it. You can only accept it. Despite their poverties, they know the riches of God's faith. Only those with no rights could see God's work in a prophet. Only those with no money can appreciate the love of a home-cooked meal instead of a fancy steak at a fancy restaurant. When we live in privilege, it's hard for us to know how much we need God. Because we kind of think we don't on a day-to-day basis. We're doing just fine. The real faith you often see lying in people that are surviving on their faith. They're fueled by the hope of Jesus Christ. When you're a king or a powerful warrior or a wealthy business person or a tech oligarch or a real estate mogul, you already have lots of hope in this world. It makes it harder for you to see your dependence on God when you know you can depend on your social status and checking account to put dinner on the table. These slaves were completely free of wealth or power, yet they saw more clearly than the kings and commanders. It was their wisdom that led to a miracle of healing. And when you're reading scriptures, always look to the margins. That's where you get surprised. Notice the people that go unnamed. Look at the people that just say one line, or maybe don't say anything at all. What's the underdog story? It might surprise you. That's true in real life, too. Have you ever asked a person who's unhoused where they're from? What's your family like? What's your story? A lot of you probably have. Some of you may be here when you're helping someone in the thrift store or when you're working in Colors of Hunger. Have you ever been comforted by someone who is severely, floridly psychotic on a psychiatric unit just because he thought you looked like you needed a hug? Have you ever received wisdom when someone with schizophrenia? Have you ever smoked a cigarette with the group outside of an AA meeting? You learn a lot of dirty jokes. That's kind of fun. But most of the time, we don't do stuff like that. We separate ourselves from them physically and socially. We don't even name them in the story. And I'm not guilting you. I haven't been so great at just hanging out with people either lately. I used to sit at the picnic tables outside and talk to people. You know, one of those people isn't with us anymore because he got hit by a car. But I was grateful for his friendship. His name was Kenny. I used to talk to another man who would come into the thrift store asking for money sometimes. And sometimes I would give him some. Sometimes I didn't have any to give him, and he would let me know his displeasure at that. He went by the name of Tree. And I learned he died just a few nights ago. How much healing could we have received from them? They were beloveds of God, even though they were nameless and invisible to most of society. Let's wake up to them. Wake up to the margins. Normally you'd hear me saying, yeah, elevate their voices, speak out for them, and fight for their justice and liberation, but not today. Today I'm just asking you to listen to them because they might heal you. Don't speak out for them, speak to them. Believe them, even when nobody else is. Find someone in the world that nobody else is listening to and give them your full attention. Learn the names of the nameless. They may be the only reason you really encounter God today. No grand lesson, except that to God, everyone is important and everyone's beloved. So let's look in the margins, look for the people that don't have the representation. Amen? Okay.